The world had made a deal. In December, the world leaders came to an agreement to stop climate change.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
World leaders congratulated each other because lengthy negotiations had finally resulted in the decision to prevent a catastrophic warming of the Earth. A political victory. But was it? This story tells us why now, after 20 years of ineffective negotiations, a climate agreement is finally in place. It's a story of numbers, of economic predictions, and scientific theories about how our political leaders have been guided by one thing only. This is a story of money.
Imagine this is in the Gulf. You're generating solar power more cheaply than you could generate from gas.
我觉得是要感谢我们超过100万的太阳能光伏产业工人。
The single thing that will shift people off high carbon energy and into lower carbon energy is going to be the price.
Prices above competitive markets, there needs to be subsidies. When that situation is broken and free market decides to go for solar, it will break like a dam is broken.
This is Backlight. Welcome to a future full of new energy.
As a result of progressive advances in technology, policy, and finance, those solutions are reliable, efficient, and commercially competitive. We are seeing sustainable and clean technologies ramping up across all geographies, all industries, and in the most unusual places.
Last year, while all eyes were on the Paris climate negotiations, just outside Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, history was being made. This solar energy plant has changed the world. Last year, a contract was signed to expand this solar plant. The new part of the plant will produce electricity more cheaply than gas plants. Sustainable energy experts all over the world were taken by surprise by the deal. Michael Liebreich is one of them, who since 2004 has been running Bloomberg New Energy Finance, a leading research agency for investors in sustainable energy.
The DEWA solar project was really a wake-up call, particularly in the Middle East region, but really around the world, because it was an unsubsidized project, unsubsidized price, and it came in at 5.84 US cents per kilowatt hour. It opened the floodgates to a lot of countries saying, well, we would quite like a piece of that.
So, solar energy which is cheaper than the electricity produced using cheap gas? The CEO of Dubai's electricity company, DEWA, was surprised when he heard the news.
We are lucky, and it was floated at the right time, so we got the right price. The interest rate was down, and I think just we got the best price.
You go to the big oil companies that produce reports on the future of energy, the Shells, the BPs, the Exxons, and so on. And they were at the time saying, oh, solar costs about 15 cents. And here was a project in Dubai that came in at less than 6 cents. So it was a wake-up call.
I was not expected, really. I was here. Then I've been informed that the tender were open. And I see Mr. The Secretary General of ARENA. He told me, Said, you are a benchmark in renewable. I said, what? Because, we are very transparent. We put the prices on our website. And he said he received 300 articles, about this price. So we are very pleased about the result and about this achievement.
Imagine this is in the Gulf. You're generating solar power more cheaply than you could generate from gas. It changes everything.
The low price for electricity from solar energy has made the electricity company hungry for more. After a 200 megawatt expansion, there is to be a new expansion next year of 800 megawatt. And along with this deal, the Emirates have tripled their target for sustainable energy by 2020.
My understanding is that what they've told those organizations, those companies bidding, is that they would expect it to be sub 5 cents, under 5 US cents per kilowatt hour. It changes everything if solar is the cheapest single form of new power in a country or in a region.
Dubai is not the only place where solar energy is cheaper than fossil fuel electricity. All over the world, there are projects getting set to produce sustainable energy more cheaply than coal or gas plants. Australia, Chile, the state of California, Italy and Jordan have all reached the tipping point for the production of sustainable energy. And it doesn't stop there. In India, plans for a coal plant in Punjab were cancelled at the last minute because it was cheaper to cover the terrain with solar panels. It is expected that over the next few years, Mexico, Germany, Morocco, China, and a number of American states can be added to the list of countries where sustainable energy will be cheaper. Deutsche Bank expects that in a few years, solar energy will be cheaper in 80% of the world. Mike Eckhart of Citibank, who's been active in the field of sustainable energy for 40 years, is not surprised.
All of this is very predictable if you know manufacturing economics, and all of my team in those days were engineers with MBAs, so they knew how to run these estimates. All this has been very predictable, actually. And the 70s was the beginning of all this, and I picked it up right at the beginning. But it's been driven really by the cost effectiveness of renewable energy, particularly renewable electricity, is what we're talking about. Just in these last 3 to 5 years, particularly 5 years, the cost of solar cells has dropped tremendously. Today, even though there are many incentives, many subsidies, many encouragements to use renewable energy, it's actually become cost competitive on its own, even without those. So it's good to have those, but this is a very big success happening right now.
I have never had any doubt that the costs of these technologies would come down. Early in my career, one of the things I learned to do was to calculate experience curves. The experience curve, the way it works is every time you double the cumulative experience in a particular activity, the costs come down by a roughly fixed amount. And I've calculated them in my career for many, many industries. Of course, in semiconductors, there's the famous Moore's Law, which is the 50% reduction in every 18 months. But that's really a special case in an industry which is doubling volume so quickly and so consistently in terms of the number of microchips and that pervade everything around us. That continues to grow at such a rate that the doublings happen very quickly. It's the same with whether it's the solar cells and panels, or whether it's the inverters, or whether it's the software that you use to control it. Also, the wind turbines. There's a lot of steel and concrete involved, and that doesn't go down in cost quite as fast, but all of the wind-specific components, all the software that manages it, the blades, which are very specific, etc., that's all coming down in cost on these very consistent experience curves. The destination, that sense of inevitability, you have no doubt, because it's just wait and then you'll reach that tipping point.
Renewable energy is subject to manufacturing economics, where all products go down in cost the more you make, versus the competition, fossil fuels, are resource-oriented, not manufacturing, and the cost of resources goes up the more you use. And so you fundamentally have two curves that we're going to cross, and they've crossed in the last 5 years, in particular the last 3 years. And so I've had a smile on my face for 20 years, and I knew this was going to be a big winner. If you really got into the numbers, and I said, this is unstoppable. I saw this coming, and it's just fantastic to be here now and to see it happening. And then wind turbine costs have really come down as they build bigger towers, longer blades, more efficient gearboxes. The whole thing has just improved. And so the cost of solar electricity, the electricity from solar energy, has dropped 80% in the last 5 years. The cost of wind electricity has dropped 50% in the last 5 years. So in both cases, the electricity from wind and solar has come into economic competitiveness, finally.
Attention to what used to be called alternative energy.
We see that investors that would have thought of investing in a wind farm as kind of weird and exotic and somehow, high risk and so on, and we see them now, much, much more comfortable.
Jochen Wermuth is a German investor who has been operating in sustainable energy for quite some time. He thinks the current price reductions will convince other large investors to invest in sustainable energy. And he has very large investment funds in mind, such as the funds of the Middle East oil states.
The aim is to collect money, to convince sovereign wealth funds to move billions, we hope. If you're sitting on, say, $2,000 billion worth of natural gas and $200 billion of cash, if you only allocated 1% of the assets to what I call the new industrial revolution, which is defined by competitive renewable power, greater resource efficiency, internet-enabled efficiency, decentralized power, they could actually be around in 10 years' time. All you see here is a joke. Everything, yeah. The tourism, the airline, everything disappears when oil disappears because it's too expensive to bring the food here, to heat the to cool the place. And they could be a leader in the new industrial revolution if they switch, but they have a very limited time horizon. Because in 5 years' time, all of their reserves have gone, and they haven't built the new reserves, new base of revenue, then they're gone. For example, Saudi Arabia, with $600 billion reserves, $60 billion deficit, in 10 years' time they're broke. So if they don't switch, they may lose their future. So one sheikh taking one positive decision, that would be a great signal. 2003, it came with then Minister of the Environment, Gabriel, was just here as well, and he said, you got to change to renewable, and they thought, you're just totally crazy. It's 800 cents per kilowatt hour, you're completely crazy. Now you come back and say, sorry, it's now actually cheaper than oil. Say, yeah, oh, maybe you're right. So it's a much easier story. And what we need to do is explain to them that renewable power is so cheap for power generation that there's no chance for oil, gas and coal. But of course the life now is very easy. Oil comes out the ground, you do nothing, you drive your Ferrari. To think hard and to build new things. So what's the chance? I don't know. I'd say 25%, very optimistic. My colleagues would say 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000, but I think because it's human, yeah. People care to have a future. They care about having a home for the people, and I think if you talk to them about, like I've been to the wedding of some of these sheikhs, kiss each other on the nose, I don't know. They're all nice guys, and I think they don't like to kill the world. That's my hope. Thank you for coming. The world has changed dramatically. I've been investing in renewable power since 2000, and last year was the year when the price of renewables fell below the price of coal, oil and gas. And as a result, the whole world we live in is about to change drastically. That's a shocking news that appeared in last October when there was an open tender for the power for Dubai and was won by Diva power plant at 5.65 cents per kilowatt hour. Oil would have to fall to $10 a barrel to compete with this price of solar. 15 years ago, it was 100 times more expensive to get power from solar. So all these 15 years, there had to be subsidies for anybody in their right mind to put a solar panel on the roof. Now, in Germany, I ask myself, do I pay 20 cents to the government, or do I put a panel on my roof for 9 cents a kilowatt hour, plus a battery in the basement for 5 cents a kilowatt hour, and I'm free of the government?
Social shifts, which are really long overdue. The energy industry is probably the most macho and socially backwards and corruption-ridden industry in the world. That's not even a controversial statement. That you could prove that just by reading a newspaper.
This reduction in the price of sustainable energy is causing the reshuffling of many a deck all over the world. New major investors are seeing solar panels and wind turbines in a different light.
I used to hear a lot about how, in theory, investor X or bank Y would love to invest in clean energy, but it was so risky. It was too risky. And obviously I was looking at it and thinking, well, the technology's not risky, and it might be a bit more windy, less windy, more sunny, less sunny, but you can deal with that. There's statistics, there's weather forecasting, there's insurance and so on. And it always struck me as an oddity, because those same investors would wake up owning a big chunk of BP after the Macondo spill, or they'd wake up owning a big chunk of TEPCO after the Fukushima accident. And they didn't seem to see that what they were actually doing was much more risky than investing in clean energy. The single most important thing that changed it was Warren Buffett in the US started to invest in wind and solar. He didn't invest in technology, he just bought projects. And that opened a lot of mainstream investors' eyes, because they said, hang on a second, this isn't just a bunch of tree huggers saying we should invest in this and accept lower returns because it's the right thing to do for the world. This is Warren Buffett building a massive portfolio of wind and solar projects. Let's have a look at what he's doing. Never forget, we have to talk about the system, because as you get more and more renewable energy, intermittent energy in the system, so you've got to invest elsewhere in the system, in the grid, perhaps in power storage, in order to continue to operate. It's about ecosystem changes, where you can do some of this, and then that enables that, and then you can do some of the other, and then this changes, and so on. To use Facebook terminology, it's complicated.
A wind farm or a solar project is going to last at least for the life of the financing, and maybe 2 or 3 times that. These might last 40 years, 60, even 100 years for solar projects. And that stabilizes economics. Basically, your cost of electricity for the life of that plant. You're not going to have natural gas prices spiking and then dropping, coal prices going up and down. And it's a stabilizing factor for every country that really gets a high percentage